Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 877B and today's date is January 26, 2016 and the title of the episode is New Bill Will Give the President Total War Authority Anywhere on the Globe, including the U.S. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, for the first time ever, the government spent more on health care than Social Security. The U.S. government spent $936 billion last year on health programs, including Medicare, Medicaid, and of course subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. $54 billion more than Social Security received. This is the first time this has happened. And we're seeing that the Affordable Care Act is not affordable whatsoever. It's not for the people. It doesn't give benefits to the people the way it should. And most of the people can't even use it because they never hit their deductibles. All they're doing is paying these large monthly fees, premiums each month. Of course, the government officials didn't want Obamacare. That's why they exempted themselves. And if they exempted themselves, you know it's not for the people. You know if they didn't want it, you definitely should not want this. Now, the FBI temporarily halted efforts to process denial appeals on background checks. If you were purchasing a weapon, you have to get a background check by the FBI, and if it's denied, you're allowed to appeal it. But it looks like they halted this, and they halted it for 7,100 people in America. They're in limbo right now. And the federal government will not allow them to buy a gun. And this is coming from the FBI Assistant Director Stephen Morris. He said the halt in processing appeals, which went into an effect on January 20th, became necessary because the number of Americans buying guns has overwhelmed the FBI background check examiners. Now, every time we have these hoaxes, these false flags, and Obama comes out and says you have to give up your weapons, guess what? Gun purchases surge. He's like the best salesman for weapon purchases. And this actually goes against the constitutional rights of the people, because the Second Amendment says the people have the right to own and carry a firearm. And right now the government is deciding when they will allow you to purchase that weapon. And if they temporarily halted this, it could be for 3 months, 6 months, a year. And if you really think about this, they figured out a way to get around allowing people to purchase weapons. Because all they have to do is say, okay, listen, we can't keep up with this, so we're going to have to halt this right now for 6 months, 8 months, a year. And you know, every time the government says this is temporary, it always seems to end up to be permanent. Almost like in 1971 when Nixon came out and said, because of speculators in the gold market, we're going to have to take the dollar off the gold standard. But this is only a temporary measure. Well, here we are 40 plus years later, and we're still off the gold standard. So we know this might not be temporary. So this is something we need to watch. Now, out in Oregon, we understand that Haben Bundy and the group of ranchers are still out there, and they are pushing their agenda saying that the BLM has no right to take the land, and they're absolutely right. I mean, they're standing up for the rights of the people out in Oregon. And from a document data dump, it exposed that the BLM is there because the land contains minerals. The land is rich in minerals. And we know the government has been taking a lot of the land as collateral for this debt. Now, we know the propaganda was out there about North Korea exploding a hydrogen bomb. The U.S. researchers in the nuclear area of the government cannot find any evidence that there was any type of hydrogen bomb explosion. We know there was an earthquake up in North Korea, and I'm starting to think that's all it was an earthquake. And they're using this to convince everyone that North Korea is coming to get us. Now, Russia is coming out saying they are unconvinced that North Korea tested a hydrogen bomb. They're saying that there's no evidence whatsoever that they did. And they said we are currently in consultations with America, the Chinese partners, the Republic of Korea, Japan, on what occurred. And all these countries are unsure what actually happened. Now the question is, who put out the propaganda to make them think there was a hydrogen bomb? We have to think about this because this is what always happens. They leak propaganda and we know why they do it. They need to demonize a country. They need to increase military spending. They need to move military assets into the area of the country because what they're doing at this point is they are preparing for war. And they're provoking these countries. This is the whole point of this. Now, out in Ukraine, we have Poroshenko and other government employees talking about how they're going to get Crimea back. And Lavrov is out there saying that any talks or questions about Crimea returning to Ukraine is not going to happen. There are no talks because there's nothing to talk about. Crimea held a referendum in 2014 where 96% of the voters supported the move to Russia. So Russia didn't steal anything. Crimea said, okay, we don't like that the United States is bringing in a puppet government. We don't want to be part of this. And they said, we want to break off. And they asked Russia, can we join you? And Russia said, okay. The southeastern people said the same thing. But they didn't ask to join Russia. They said they wanted to be independent. And this is why we see the fighting going on in Ukraine. You have to remember, the United States government had the coup because they thought they were going to get a port on the Black Sea. They were going to have the southeastern section, which has coal production, and they were going to basically capture the pipelines of natural gas flowing from Russia to Europe, and they were going to control this area. This was the whole purpose of it. This is why Joe Biden had his son on the board of directors of the gas companies in Ukraine. He was placed on the board of directors. This is why John Kerry had his roommate put into the company in Ukraine. All of this was done on purpose. Moscow right now is saying they are demanding strict implementation of the Minsk II ceasefire agreement from Kiev. But we see Kiev is stalling. And why are they stalling? They don't want to fulfill the Minsk II ceasefire agreement. There is a reason for it. Because if they do, they will allow the southeastern area to be separate and apart from Ukraine. They don't want this to happen. They don't want them to have elections. They don't want any of this. Why? Because they're starting a major offensive very soon. We see right now intelligence is coming in from DPR. They spotted a group of foreign mercenaries arriving in the Donbass area. It's about 30 people that arrived by a private military company communicating in English, and they're about 11 kilometers from the contact line. We know that Kiev is moving weapons and military personnel up to the contact line. All of this is moving forward. They're getting ready. And I think once the spring hits, they're going to attempt an offensive. Now, the European countries, they are bogged down with the refugee crisis. Migrants are all over the place. Turkey is releasing them under the instruction of the United States government central bankers. And we have to remember, all of this was because of the United States, because they went into Libya, they went into Lebanon, they went into Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and they created this crisis. And now they're putting pressure on Europe to help out in Syria. This was all part of their plan. And they're creating chaos throughout the region. And in France, we see the French government, they're going to be deploying the military in Calais to handle the humanitarian crisis in this area. They're saying truck drivers traveling through the port of Calais, they cannot drive through there because of what's going on a daily basis with migrants. And tensions are flaring. People are becoming very upset. We see what's happening in Germany with riots, with rapes, and everything else. And it's getting to the point where the European governments are going to shut everything down. All the borders are going to be closed. And they're just going to stop everything. And I think this is the U.S. government putting pressure on Europe to help out in the Middle East, to bring in forces into the Middle East so this could all be stopped. We see out in Libya, the new Libyan unity government was rejected. And we're seeing within 10 days now, they're going to pick a new unity government. And then they'll propose this new government to Parliament. But we'll have to watch and see how this plan goes. Now, we know the United States government central bankers with the coalition forces, they are waiting for this new unity government. General Joseph F. Dunford, Jr., the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was quoted recently as saying that the United States is preparing in conjunction with its allies a renewed military campaign in Libya. So they're going to be working with NATO, which includes France, Britain, Italy, and they're saying that they need to go back into Libya to set things right. Now, as soon as the new unity government is in place, the government will allow NATO and the coalition forces inside of Libya to take back control from the Islamic State, which we know this is not why they're really there. They're going to be taking control back from the people of Libya. They're going to get all of those people, round them up, and basically put them in prison. So they are not a problem. Or they're just going to kill them. And we can see they're getting prepared and ready to do this. Putin is calling out Obama, because you have to remember and go back in time, back to 2009, 2011, when Obama said, the reason why we have the missile shield in Europe, it was to guard against Iran and their ballistic missile program. And Russia said, well, we don't believe that's why the missile shield is there. I don't think anyone really believed that's why the missile shield was there, because the missiles were actually pointing towards Russia. And right now, Putin is saying, okay, if this was truly for Iran, we now have the P5+1 deal implemented, which says, and they're watching Iran, that they can't develop a ballistic missile program with a nuclear weapon. So why is the missile shield in Europe? And of course, nobody's answering this. Wouldn't you think they would take it down now? Wouldn't you think there'd be announcements saying we don't need this anymore? No, because that's not why it's there. It is there for Russia. That's it. That's what it's there for. Now, the U.S. is trying everything they possibly can to bash Putin, to demonize Russia. And they're pulling everything out of their bag of tricks that they possibly can. U.S. Undersecretary of the Treasury for Terrorism, Adam Zubin, is accusing Russian President Putin of being the picture of corruption and using his position to enrich friends and allies using state assets. Now, we can replace Putin with any of the U.S. government employees, and it would be the same exact thing. Right? Because where are all these funds going in the U.S. that disappear? The billions of dollars in Afghanistan, the trillions of dollars in the Pentagon, all the government employees taking bribes from foreign entities and foreign governments, from corporations, from central banks, enriching themselves. They enter government with a mediocre salary. They leave as multi-millionaires. But of course, they're using this on Putin And they're saying that we knew this for many, many years because his salary of $110,000 per year is really not accurate because, he has net worth of over $40 billion. Well, we could say this about any politician here in the United States. So Russia said, okay, you're out there and you're making these allegations. We just can't brush this off because this is just not like a media hoax. This is the U.S. Treasury saying that we are completely corrupt. Please provide the proof. We would like to see the proof. Show us. So they put this back on the United States. And so far, we've heard absolutely nothing. Now, Lavrov is saying these Syria talks will not be successful if the Kurds are not invited. Now, we know Turkey does not want the Kurds there. They say they're terrorists. So the Kurds are terrorists, but the Islamic State, the opposition, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, they're not terrorists. Yes, they are terrorists. They don't want the Kurds there. They don't want them to represent part of what is going on here. They want them completely out of the picture. And we see that what's going on here is that they don't want these talks to succeed. They're already set up to fail. And this is what the United States does. They make a big deal about peace talks, ceasefire, and basically what they do is they completely set it up to fail. And then they blame it on Assad, they will blame it on Russia, and they'll say this is why it failed. This is what they're setting it up to be, because they're already planning a military operation in this area. Russia is still saying the U.S. is refusing to hold military coordination with Russia. They don't want to cooperate because the United States is saying, well, Russia supports Assad, so we can't cooperate with the Islamic State. But the goal is the Islamic State. Well, that's the goal of Russia. It's not the goal of the United States. Now we see that these refugee crisis is actually working because the Dutch Parliament now is deciding that, yes, we will back bombing inside of Syria. We will go after the Islamic State targets. Well, we know for a fact that they're not going after the Islamic State. And we can see that they're trying to get all of the coalition forces in on this. They want their troops, they want their planes, they want a massive invasion of Syria. Russia is calling out Turkey saying, okay, we see the military buildup on the Syrian border. We see what you're doing right now. You're carving out a safe zone. You have an airfield. You're bringing in military assets. And all this propaganda telling the world that Russia's doing this, this is actually Turkey and the United States. And they're trying to convince everyone that it's Russia to take all eyes off of what they're really doing. And what they're really doing is they're preparing military, they're preparing military assets. They have an airfield in a country where Syria did not give them permission to be. Remember, they invited Russia, not Syria. Now, a couple days ago, we mentioned that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is going to rush to the floor a bill that is going to give the president total war authority anywhere on the globe. So wherever the Islamic State is, that's where the United States can go. Basically, he is the supreme commander and can do whatever he wants. And this also includes the United States, where he can bring the military in the United States to go after the Islamic State. How convenient. And Congress is basically, if they pass this, they will give him unlimited war powers everywhere. Think about this for a second. Allowing him to bring in military into the country to say, oh no, we're going after the Islamic State. Into countries around the world saying, oh no, we're just going after the Islamic State. When we know this is not the real reason of why they're really there. So basically, if this goes through, because they're fast-tracking it right now, we will see war around the world. and we will see martial law here in the United States. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.